I've been asked to come here and talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. It's very exciting that Magnolia have started to build this back end to the Internet of Things, but I think there's a lot of confusion and it needs explaining. We need to understand what the Internet of Things really is, what that means, and what that means for brands and companies, and what you can use that for to interact with your customers and really use that to build your businesses. So my name is Josh. I run a company called RPD International, and we are a global design and manufacturing company. I have quite a strange past. I started my engineering career when I was about 10 years old. Does anybody remember Robot Wars? Yeah, a few people, a few geeks. So Robot Wars was based on this whole idea that people would build crazy contraptions and try and fight each other, create all these sorts of weapons and remote-controlled things, and it was fascinating. For a 10-year-old, I'm not sure what all the 40, 50-year-old people were doing, playing with these things. So I started to play and explore these areas, and I would turn up with my parents and just try and compete. And it got to the point where I started to push things a little bit further than was necessarily possible for the tools and things that I had at that age. So I started designing things in really basic CAD programs like Google SketchUp, designing pneumatic systems and really quite complex electronics and other pieces to make these robots work, to the point where I was a bit stuck in what I could do and how much further I could actually deliver the stuff I was designing. So I started looking for factories, and I went around the UK looking for a manufacturer that would take on the concepts and ideas that I have and produce them from my drawings and code, but just couldn't afford it. No one would take me seriously, and there was this joke going that, maybe the kid should go to China because it's cheaper. Your pocket money goes further in China. It turns out that that's actually possible. So I spent a good few years when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 as well, in China remotely, working with factories, paying them my pocket money through PayPal accounts, designing and manufacturing things so that I could compete in this world of strange geek fighting robotics. But it got to the point where actually people were starting to see the stuff I was designing and find it quite interesting, and I started doing some contract work, and I started with very close friends and people who I was competing with who just happened to work at large companies who said, can you fix this? Can you look at this for us? What do you think of this? Which spiraled out of all control. And by the time I was 17, I was controlling millions and millions of dollars of supply chain after school. I'd come from school at 3 o'clock. I'd log in and start working in China or the US, and just having a very different, fresh perspective on the engineering world. The engineering world is very much a world of this works, let's not try and change it too much. So that fresh set of eyes saying, well, look at all this new technology, these new opportunities we have, was very, very powerful for a lot of companies. And so when I was 17, somebody found out that I was only 17, and I was very quickly fired. But we moved on to try and see how you could formalize that into something that was almost like a formula for creating that outside perspective and being able to allow companies to very quickly innovate and deliver products. So we do now run that service in 40 countries. We're just over 100 factories now. And we're taking everything from corporate R&D, where people are delivering products over 2 years, now down to 3 and 6 months, all to the point where you've got companies that work with us who are 2-3 people who are now shipping tens of thousands of units in 40, 50 countries without ever stepping foot in a factory or having any knowledge of engineering. It's a really powerful back-end resource. But we're starting to do a lot of work in advertising, which seems quite a strange place for a technical engineering and manufacturing company. But there's this real kind of change of what advertising is and how you engage your customers. For a long time, it was all about writing on walls, doing posters, and then there was a very short phase where people thought, well, if I put my logo on a pen, I'm going to sell thousands of these cars. That seemed to work. For 6 months, us as a society were complete idiots. Then we moved more digital. Everybody wanted an app. Everybody wanted a website. Everybody wanted a flash game. Everybody wanted to try and engage with people in this new scalable way where you create something once and it works for 1 billion people all at the same time. But we're starting to move away from that. The issue is that this market for digital engagement, this market for this software innovation is really starting to become very saturated. It's very hard to differentiate yourself when creating advertisements or ways to engage your customers or sell products to your customers in a digital format. And we're starting to see this change towards products. The Internet of Things and connected products are a brand name for what is evolving as something that has a true value to you, that allows a brand to truly connect with you. And so we have this kind of overview of what advertising looks like in this new integrated campaign world. Outdoor advertising is traditional advertising, posters, banners, paying to write things on people's cars, buses, whatever. That lasts as long as you're going to pay for it. This new old age of digital advertising, that lasts a bit longer. You pay for it once, you develop it, it lasts a bit longer. It has this heavy engagement, it's social media, it's games, it's very clever buying and selling tools. It's great, but it doesn't last forever. You have to keep innovating. And then there's physical product that comes as this new layer. And this is a product that has a true purpose to it. It helps you solve jet lag when you're an airline. It helps you drive safer and better and save on your car insurance when you're a car insurance provider. It's a product that allows you to offer your customers something more valuable in their life and links subliminally to your brand without shouting about it. And this is, I guess, what has now been branded as the Internet of Things. So in the last 12 months, we've done about 150 projects in the Internet of Things, taking from concepts and problems like brand engagement and all the way through to how do you make a Formula One car go faster, and developing those through all the way into production and delivery to end customers. I thought, why don't we pull out 5 tips and 5 examples of how developing products is really going to change your brand, change your company, and how that sort of work can be done. And so the first one of these is understanding why. With a big new shiny brand name like the Internet of Things comes a lot of case studies of pointless things. Saying that we are actually developing toilet sensors at the moment, which sounds hilarious, but it does have a true meaning to it. This is a product that we've developed recently for Bacardi. Bacardi own a vodka brand called Grey Goose, and they're desperate to sell more bottles of Grey Goose, but they're looking at it in the wrong way. Grey Goose is marketed in a sense of an experience. When you drink Grey Goose vodka, you're living this Grey Goose life. You are in an elite class of people drinking an elite drink and an elite experience. The question is not how do you sell bottles, the question is how do you sell that experience? And so we worked with them to create these pieces of jewellery that would connect to the internet and allow you to understand your customer. And so they launched this in Courchevel a few months ago, and mixologists went round the 1850 at Courchevel and found, wealthy and kind of, let's say, elite people who frequent Courchevel and ask them about, what do you drink? What do you do when you go out? What is that lifestyle? What does that look like? What is that experience? And as they captured all that data, what they were doing is they were loading it to this jewelry and loading it to a back-end database where they could then revisit that and understand that lifestyle for these individual people, and then what they could do with that data. And this jewelry goes away with the person, and then throughout those evenings and the time they spent at Courchevel, there were lots of bars and clubs and event venues that were activated by Bacardi so that you could take this piece of jewelry and you could go and scan it, or you could walk into the room and it would sense the code that is unique to your piece of jewelry. And all of that data that they'd collected in their back-end CMS system would be released. And so you might go to the barman and you say, I've got one of these geese, and he scans it, and he takes you through to this room, and all of those drinks that you've told them how much you love are all laid out on the table. 2 hours later, a chauffeur turns up and takes you to your favourite show. You get to live this experience. And so the whole idea for Bacardi is that they're going to build a lifestyle around this brand. And by having one of these pieces of jewellery that's a very limited, only I think a few thousand in the world, you're able to unlock that. And so you create this idea of escalation, this aspiration to this elite lifestyle, and everybody's on a mission to retrieve these pieces of jewellery all around the world at Cannes and Monaco Grand Prix and all these fancy, considered elite events to live that lifestyle. It's not about selling bottles, it's about selling a lifestyle. The reason is, why are we producing this product? What is the purpose of this product? It's not to sell bottles, it's to sell a lifestyle. The second most interesting thing we've done recently is working with a corporate ERP company. Their biggest problem is, what is their software worth? Their software is only worth as much data as they can fit into it. There's no point in having an analytics platform if none of the data entered is of any use to you. And so how do you reduce the friction in data entry? It's not traditionally a product design problem, but in this world of screens and a million screens, how many screens do most people have here? At least 2 with you, maybe 3 or 4 if you've got a watch as well now. How do you engage and truly extract the data that is all around us? And so the problem wasn't how do you reduce 1 in 30 fields on every form that you've got to enter. If you want to do your expenses, you don't want to sit down for 3 hours to do that. It's how do you understand in the moment what's going on, and how do you interpret that and use that? And so we worked with them to look at how you could use beacons and corporate enterprise data to turn the entire ERP project management system into yes or no questions. How could you leave the office at 11 o'clock in the morning and your watch says, I could see you've got a calendar invite in 20 minutes, it's over here, is that where you're going? Yes. Your phone turns up, you've got instructions on your phone, you start moving there. As you get closer, it starts prompting you with questions that you might want to ask, or maybe notes that you've made about the client. As you get there, you open your laptop and all that information that's pre-backed up about your client and all their previous communications and files are all there in front of you ready for your meeting. It completely changes the amount of data and the value and the meaning of the data that's entered into the system. But what you haven't done is sit there and remove one field in every 30. You've completely rethought what it is you're doing. You're aligning what your customer actually wants to achieve. Designing new products and designing new experiences is not about products and experiences, it's about people. If you can understand what your people really need to do and how you can assist them, you create far more value than creating a new product or a new experience that's just there for the sake of it, or is just there as a top layer. So the second tip that I have, are we on number 2? Second tip that I have is human beings. You're designing for human beings, consider it. Number 3 is about actual production. If you're going to start making physical products and you're traditionally a software manufacturer or you don't usually work in manufacturing, you need to understand what things cost, why they cost that, and hence, what are you going to do with this product? We had a client recently who was trying to sell property to people in very large chunks of time, selling 4-year contracts without them ever seeing that property. And they had this fantastic prototype in the Oculus Rift of how they would show you this environment, and you'd come to a center and you'd try on an Oculus Rift, which is a virtual reality unit, and you'd be able to explore the apartment and see everything. But the problem with that is distribution. An Oculus Rift is $1,500. You can't make many of those, and if you have to have a central hub where people have to come, it's no longer frictionless. It's not a digital sale anymore. So how could you make that into something that's mainstream? And Google have been working very hard on something called Cardboard, which is where you take a Google phone, a Nexus phone, and you put it into a piece of folded cardboard and play a virtual reality film. But the lenses in this piece of cardboard allow you to see it as a fully immersive, accelerometer activated piece of content. So we looked at that, and we looked at how we could modify that to be something that's more scalable. We started developing these cardboard units that are completely foldable, completely flat packable, and helping them distribute those. Rather than having a $1,500 cost, these things cost about $1 a unit. Even with lenses and everything else, they could now hand them out to customers. You could sign up online and receive one for free. Suddenly that distribution channel is far larger than it was previously, and you get back towards a completely frictionless, almost software sale, but with the physical product that creates such a more powerful engagement, such a more immersive experience, especially with the VR. So my third tip is about understanding what the product is, how it's made, what it costs, and hence how can you make this experience the most positive one possible for your customers. Fourth one is about prototyping. Everybody knows, and the definition of prototyping is that it's for experimenting, it's for understanding. But how many people actually use prototyping for experimenting and understanding? How many people actually understand what that really means? We worked recently with an airline, and the thing about airlines is that people think they're fine. As soon as you get off the plane, you think that was fine, that wasn't so bad. In reality, 12 hours into a 24-hour flight, you will do anything to get off that plane. I don't care if you've paid £5,000 for that ticket, you want to get off that plane. But people can't see that. As soon as you're away from that experience, you can't see it. You don't understand your own thinking. And so how do you understand that if you're an airline? How do you understand that if you're a service provider and you're trying to interview customers and they tell you it's fine when you really know it's not? So we started developing kind of products that were made to wear or products that were made to fail, or with sensors in them, so that we could understand how these things were really being used. Headphones that had sensors in them linked to the entertainment system. Is it that every hour you take your headphones off for 10 minutes and you put them back on? Does that link up to the content you're watching? Is it you're watching hour-long series? Or is it actually that after an hour the earphones become unbearable and they're not comfortable, and hence can you see where the pressure points are? Can you see where actually these things are rubbing? Is that different in men as it is in women? Is that different in children as it is in adults? All of that data is very, very valuable. But the issue is actually, is that the data you're really looking for in your prototyping, or are you putting it on the table and saying, what do you think? That's not real prototyping, that's not real understanding of what this product really is. And so my fourth tip is using prototyping and building this environment of continuous iteration to truly understand your customers and build products that really make sense to the experience you're trying to deliver. And my final tip links straight back into that. I don't think you should ever truly ship a product. I think that every time you launch a product, that product should be a prototype. That product should be in constant iteration. We've recently been building supply chains so that you can actually do this. We've been building supply chains that use a lot of rapid prototyping, 3D printing technologies, so that your logistics supply chain is no longer about DHL and UPS. Your logistics supply chain is about Cisco. How do you get a 20 megabyte file from the UK to the US so it could be produced? That is the length of your logistics. No longer is it a 5-day sea container that's moving across the sea. It's a file moving under the sea through a fiber optic cable. That is the future supply chain. And so how can you use those kind of technologies to continuously iterate? How can you build supply chains that never ever ship a final product? Every month you ship a new product and it's a second version. How do you continuously understand how these products are being used? And that's really where this whole back end to the Internet of Things should really come in. It's as much about understanding your customer and storing customer data as storing usage data. If you know how something's used, you know how you could improve it. If you can store that data, analyze it, and use true feedback from that to iterate on these products, once you've got a supply chain that allows you to deliver that, you can really change the kind of engagement and interaction that you have with your customers and hence grow your businesses in a really fantastic and exciting way. So, very quickly, 5 tips. Understand the problem you're solving. It's not about what, it's about why. Solutions start with people. You're designing for human beings, understand human beings. What do your customers want to achieve? How can you assist that? Not just add something else they have to think about. Once you know why, ask how. If you're not used to building manufacturing and building physical things, it's very different. And so you need to really understand the costs and the times involved in this and work back from that to develop your products and design your products based on that information. Prototyping is about learning and understanding. It's not about questionnaires. It's not about sitting there and saying, what do you think, 1 to 5? It's about truly understanding how this thing is used, how this thing breaks, and how that differs in the kind of markets that it's being used with. And finally, don't ever stop. Production is a continuous cycle. If you can manage the feedback of data from the usage of your products, continuously iterate. Use that to build products that truly fit the experience you're trying to create, and your customers will thank you for it. So thank you.